Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. This is going to be part one of my September wrap up. I did read quite a lot of books in September, so I thought instead of having the wrap up being like ridiculously long, I'd break it down into two. So I'll just give you a quick kind of summary of how September went. So I read 4 5-star books, 6 4-star books, 5 3-star books, 0 2-star books, and I read a very, very painful 3 1-star books. And I read some with my eyeballs and some with my ear holes. So the count is 8 with my eyeballs and 10 with my ear holes. So 18 books in total. And I had 7 arcs read and reviewed in that time, which was fantastic, but I still have got about 28 to go. This is just ridiculous. So I'm going to kind of tell you about a mix of the books. I'm not just going to do all the 5 stars in this video, etc. I'm just going to do a mix. And so the first book I want to tell you about is Fighting Words by Kimberly Brubaker Bradley. This is a middle grade book. We've got 10-year-old Della and her sister Suki. They end up in foster care. The mum ends up in prison and the mum's boyfriend isn't looking after them very well. So these 2 young girls end up in foster care. The sister is 16 years old, I think. And I guess it's kind of just about their relationship and their relationship with other people, how they kind of get through the day, the survival kind of instinct that they have, you know, like protecting themselves because they've already been through some stuff. And also about the abuse that kind of gradually is revealed as the book goes on. And so even though it's middle grade, it deals with some pretty heavy topics, I would say, but it's written absolutely fantastically. Especially the 10-year-old girl character. It's very, very believable. She's just like this little stubborn, outspoken firecracker, and it's about how those around her are trying to break down those walls to get in, to be able to find out what's happened and look after her and provide the care she needs. The next one is The Diviners by Libba Bray. This one, I have listened to the audio of Beauty Queens by Libba Bray previously, and it was just amazing. I absolutely loved it. It was fantastic. So much fun and different accents and voices for every character. It was just really, really great. And I was kind of hoping that this will be very similar, but it's not. It's completely different. So this one is set in the 1920s in America. So if anyone is doing the Pop Sugar Challenge, then for the prompt, a book set in the 20s, there you go, this is it. This is what I read it for. And we follow Evie, who seems to have some kind of ability to know people's secrets or things that they've done just by holding an object of theirs. And this kind of lands her in some trouble. People see her as like a troublemaker. So she ends up being sent away to live with her uncle in New York. Her uncle owns this kind of museum of the occult and mysterious curiosities, things like that. And not long after Evie arrives, there is some kind of brutal murder where a body part is removed, but there's like an occult type symbol left on the victim. And so her uncle ends up being dragged into helping the police to investigate this because the occult and mystical things are his specialism. So Evie lends a hand as well. And there's like a series of murders that are very similar with different body parts taken and, you know, in a ritualistic way. And so it's about them investigating and trying to track down the killer. There is lots of like paranormal elements to it. Lots of people who they come across that have got other powers that they can, you know, use. And yeah, it was interesting and I enjoyed it, but I didn't really enjoy it. So unfortunately, this one was just 3 stars for me. And I know that it's part of a series. I don't know how many books there are, but I probably won't be carrying that series on. And then we are on to The Sun and Her Flowers by Rupi Kaur. I read Milk and Honey last year and really enjoyed it. I'm not a big poetry fan. However, this type of I don't know what the term is for it, but it's like a more modern poetry where it doesn't fully have to rhyme, and then there's like the button poetry, I think it is, or Instagram poetry. So I'm not big upon this, but yeah, I have enjoyed those types of poetry. So I thought I'd give Rupi's second book a go. It didn't, for me, it didn't feel as good as the first book. Like there wasn't anything that really grabbed me, which is a shame. I'm wondering if it's because it was all about love and healing and growth, whereas the first one had a lot of like darker subjects in. So yeah, it was still good, and I'm glad I read it. It wasn't brilliant for me. So I gave that one 3 stars as well. Next up is The Doctor Will See You Now by Amir Khan. This was an arc that I was given via NetGalley. I was desperate to read this because if you've seen any of my other videos or posts on Insta, yeah, I am a big medical memoir fan, big. And this was fantastic. I loved it, loved it, loved it. I couldn't put it down. It was just amazing. I mean, like, it's the life of a doctor. Amir Khan is a GP, and it's like his day-to-day practice as a GP. And I'll be honest, I have been that person sat in a doctor's waiting room being kept way beyond my appointment time because the doctor's running late, and I've been absolutely fuming. I've been like, oh, this is ridiculous, this doctor should have better time management. And I've also been the person that if looks could kill, I would personally have murdered my GP surgery receptionist several times over. And that's coming from somebody who was a medical professional and understands about, you know, things that come up last minute and having to deal with complicated issues. So I think for him to even like kind of open the eyes of somebody that already has their eyes open, if you know what I mean. Like, I already know these issues exist, but it just kind of, the way he explained things, and it just kind of made me think, God, you know what? I'm just being such an arse when I'm being annoyed at things like that, because it's not because the doctor's decided that he wants to have an extra break in the middle of the day and he's ended up behind. It's because he's dealing with someone that's far more unwell and far more complex, and they need that extra time, you know. So yeah, I think it's a fantastic book. It teaches you some things, it raises awareness, and it tells you about some of the more interesting patients that a GP has. You know, like, it's not all throat infections and sore ears and, you know, a child with a cough. I mean, there was even a story of a patient where this patient turned up for surgery with a hammer in his pocket. Like, why would he need that hammer? Well, you'll find out in the book, and it's just fantastic. He deals with, you know, life and death on a daily basis, and then also there's a part towards the end where he talks about working through COVID and the way that GPs have had to run. Now, I don't know if that applies to all areas or if it's just the kind of trust that he works in, but that was also incredibly interesting. And so I ended up giving this book 5 stars. I literally whizzed through it. It was so good. And staying on the medical theme, I listened to the audiobook of Wuhan Diary, which is dispatches from the original Epicenter, and that's by Fang Fang. From what I understand, that is like a pseudonym that she uses. It's not her actual name. So this lady who wrote the diary, she was already like an author and a blog writer and things like that in Wuhan in China. And when COVID, when the outbreak first happened, she was writing kind of blog posts about her experiences, and it somehow turned into a daily diary entry on this blog. She had some difficulties where the government were completely removing some of her blog posts because they didn't like the fact that she was speaking out about things that they wanted, I guess, to keep on the down low, really. And she gives like a really honest account of people she's spoken to, the kind of rumours that are going around, the information that they were or were not given, and how other people were behaving, things like that. I was expecting this to be fantastic. For it to be written by somebody who's actually living, at ground zero, I think I had it in my head that it would be written by a frontline worker. I don't know why. I just assumed that only they would kind of have something to write about, I guess. But so that kind of disappointed me because it was, this lady just stayed in, like, they were on lockdown kind of thing, and this lady just stayed in her apartment for many, many, many days. So she wasn't actually dealing with COVID. She was dealing with, I guess, just a normal person's point of view, really, and the things they had to go through. So it did get a little monotonous when she's like, day 65, still in my apartment kind of thing. But it was kind of interesting. Just because of the kind of like my expectations and how it turned out to be, it ended up being a 3-star. And I think that is probably partly because I was expecting more COVID stuff and actually working with it, as opposed to just dealing with the kind of social distancing and lockdown rules. Next up, this is a book I've mentioned in a couple of previous videos. I think I was reading it initially and then tried to finish it over Summerween and still didn't get around to finishing it. This book dragged me down to the gutter, let me get wet, stomped all over me, poured shit on me, and just left me there. It was just terrible. It was terrible, and it dragged me into, like, oh god, I don't know, it just felt like I was never going to get out of this hellhole of this book. It's My Final Breath by Paige Darth, and this is the book where it deals with a young girl who finds herself in this kind of limbo after she passes away. She doesn't go straight to heaven, and that's because there are things that she needs to discover about her life and death before she can move on. And the things that she needs to discover are that, I mean, this isn't a spoiler, this is inferred from the synopsis, and it's right from the beginning of the book. Her mother had Munchausen's by proxy, and she was making Molly, the girl is, she was making her unwell, and then, to the point where she died. So you'd think this would be like a really emotional, difficult book, and it was just so boring, so badly written. This 11-year-old girl talks like a 30-odd year Oxford tutor. It was just terrible. The thing she came out with, oh my god, I hated this book with a passion. So 1 star, and it needs destroying. And I only finished it because it was an arc, and I do not like to not finish arcs. And sticking with the 1-star reviews, The White Tiger by Aravinda Diga. I did actually mention this book in my Two Books, One Stone, whatever, 2 books, 1 stone tag video. Still can't get it right. And yeah, well, let's just say this was one of the answers to 2 books that you absolutely hated or didn't finish. So yeah, it was terrible. We've got a boy who is born into like poverty. You know, his parents don't care about him really, and he doesn't even get a name. And it's like his story of growing up, finding himself opportunities, you know, fighting for a better life, that kind of thing. And he does. He ends up, towards the end of the book, he is a business owner. And it sounds really great. It's just not. It's horrid. It's boring. It's long-winded. I have no idea what parts of the book had to do with the story at all. And the way that he kept saying, well, he calls his penis a beak. Well, he calls everybody's penises beaks, and it's just sickening. It really made me feel sick when he was saying it. Because he'd talk about going to visit prostitutes and that he would dip his beak in the vagina or dip his beak in the anus, and it just, it was horrid, really horrid. I don't understand how this won a prize back in 2018. It's horrid. It is going out of my house. It needs burning. Right, let's cheer things up a bit with a 4-star book. And that is A Woman Is No Man by Etaf Rum. This is the story of an Arab American girl / woman living in America, and it deals with the kind of culture clashes that these young women specifically have, and how they try and deal with it, and how they try and integrate themselves into American culture, but are also having to continue Arab culture with the families. And so we follow a young girl. She is 18 and she is getting to the point where she wants to continue her education and she'd like to go on a date and things like that. And obviously she struggles because the Arab culture that her family have, she is supposed to have an arranged marriage and she's not supposed to continue her education. She's supposed to be a wife and a mother, and that is it. And this girl, Daya, she's been raised by her grandparents because she's been told that her parents died in a car crash when she was a small baby. And her grandparents are very, very traditional and very stuck in the viewpoints and the culture. The book then goes on to follow 2 different timelines, and so we follow Daya and her kind of investigating into her family and her mum in particular, and also how she is struggling with this culture clash. But then we also follow Daya's mum Isra and the kind of difficulties that she had, obviously, you know, 18 years back when she was first brought to America, and she had to deal with all that then. I really, really enjoyed this book. I thought it dealt very well with issues of culture and this kind of like feminist type viewpoint, you know, where basically the women in the story just want equality and to be treated as well as the males in the families are, but it's about this kind of compromise of how you can still maintain your culture and your beliefs and continue traditions, but at the same time you can grow and develop and learn and alter things a little bit if they don't quite, if they're not relevant, I guess, to current times. Obviously, I'm not an Own Voices reviewer of this book, but I have spoken to a couple of people who read it at the same time in our online book club, and they've said that it really was really great representation of that culture. So yeah, I gave this 4 stars, loved it. And the last book I'm going to tell you about in this video is Ginny Moon by Benjamin Ludwig. This follows a young girl, Ginny. She is a teenager, young teenager. She was taken into foster care because her mum couldn't look after her properly. It was quite neglectful, and so Ginny is now with an adoptive forever family. Unfortunately, this has been Ginny's third, I think it was, forever family. There's been previous, obviously, adoption breakdowns, and Ginny is a young girl who has autism, and it's moderate autism, enough that she does struggle to function. She gets very obsessive about things and wants an idea stuck in her head. That's kind of it. She struggles with her emotions, and often at times it doesn't seem like she has any emotion at all. And it's exploring the difficulties of her relationships with other people, including her adoptive family and friends at school, teachers, things like that. She gets this idea stuck in her head that she wants to contact her birth mother because she wants to find out what happened to her baby doll when she was taken into care. So she makes lots of attempts and comes up with lots of plans to try and contact her mum, or to try and go and visit her. And it's just really, it's a lovely story about families and how we don't, family isn't just the people that you are biologically linked to, that we can build our own families and love other people and take them into our kind of circle. And it was just, there's, considering it's a YA and it's not a thriller, there are a few little twists in it that you kind of like, oh. And she's also trying her hardest to create her big plan of escape. So yeah, it's a really, really great story. 4 stars from me. Definitely enjoyed that one more than I thought I would do. And that's all for this video. So thank you for watching, and I will see you all soon with part 2.